And we are live.
Good night, Rachel.
Welcome back to Senate Education. Thank you for joining us, Secretary Boucher and others. I see you have Jennifer Hicks with you, Danielle Dupuy, and Josh Soulier. We are looking at this letter from the federal government, United States Department of Education, to you. And we did not have Ledge Council take us through it. I should have really asked them to take us through it. We've all sort of skimmed it and looked at it. What we'd like to start out with is for you to take us through what you understand the federal government's concerns to be. We may ask, depending on the committee's request, preference, we may have Adam Schott in at some point, but we thought we would start with all of you and try to understand where we're at and the problem that we may or may not be facing. So the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Heather Boucher, Interim Secretary of Education. I am joined by Jennifer Hicks, our Director for the Division of Data Management and Analysis, and Danielle Dupuy, who is our State Director of Assessment, and also Josh Soulier, who you have met in his capacity as the Director of Education Quality. So I've brought all of our team here today because we all have different roles to play with respect to this letter, and to the extent that questions come up that might be relevant for the assessment team, for our school improvement team in terms of making the identifications for schools, or for general data concerns or questions, Josh and Jen and Danielle can certainly help with that. I had sent over 3 documents that I hope the committee was able to get. Did you get those?
We've just been looking at one document, which is the letter from the OE.
Just the letter?
Yep.
There were a couple, I apologize for that. There were supposed to be a couple of other documents that I'll make sure you get. One was just a couple of PowerPoint slides that really show, and I'll kind of walk you through because I think they're really important for context to the letter itself. So they really walk through what data we had when.
Secretary Boucher, would it be the letter from Adam Honeysett?
That's one of them. And then I see Senator Gulick, I think that one in your hand is the one that I'm on now with the blue on.
Super,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for the confusion there.
No problem.
We do want to walk you through the letter. I just wanted to talk about these other 2 documents rather quickly, just to help you all understand what's going on. So the first slide that has the arrows on it going from 2019 to 2023, it's one side of that sheet that I just saw Senator Gulick have, really kind of walks us through, and we're talking about our statewide assessment data. So this was SBAC data on literacy, ELA, math. We're now into Cognia data, math, science, literacy. Just to kind of give you a grounding, that is the data that we're talking about. Those are the assessments, the required core assessments in terms of basically math, literacy, and science, primarily math and literacy. So in 2019, everything was great, normal implementation of our statewide assessment. It was right as COVID was about to hit, as you recall. In 2020, there was no state achievement data for any state because US Ed said everyone is basically absolved from deploying state assessments as required by federal law because of the pandemic. Then in 2021, we did collect data again, but we had also gotten approval for a COVID amendment that approved us to not use the 2021 data for accountability purposes. All states had to collect that data, but we had the ability to ask the US federal government, the Department of Education, to exclude it from accountability with the idea that this was really, it was still a rough year in terms of COVID. The participation rates were not where they were supposed to be. There was a lot going on. So they approved us of that. In 2022, we again had the data, and our accountability designations were delayed because we had some challenges and problems with basically a contract because of having to change the calculations in our report card due to COVID. Now, rightfully so, US Ed says that doesn't absolve you, which we knew. And so we can talk about that. But I'm really just trying to kind of like walk you all through like what's been going on. So now in 2023, we have a new assessment, Cognia, but we're back to normal. We're back to normal in terms of state assessments. We have all the data, and that will continue moving forward. Any questions about that? Okay.
Senator Bueller.
I have some questions. Thank you so much. Just, you may not know this, Secretary Boucher, but I was wondering, do you have a sense of how many states asked for to not use their 21 data other than Vermont? Do you have enough, do you know?
I don't know, maybe Danielle or Josh would, but I would be surprised. I think every state submitted an amendment with respect to COVID. They asked for different things. I'm going to let Danielle speak to that.
I think that's correct. All states had to amend their plans because of that administration. And so I don't have an exact number, but very few would have included that data.
Okay, great. And I'm sorry, could you explain the 2022, what happened in 2022 again? I just didn't quite understand that. You had the data, but something happened with the designations. Could you walk me through that one more time, please?
Absolutely. So part of our COVID amendment that I did kind of just give you a high level was that we actually were going to, for parts of our accountability system, we have to compare across years. And because we weren't going to use 2021 for accountability purposes, our amendment said, can we please use 2019 compared to 2022? They approved us for that. So, right, Danielle, I've got those years correct. I'm pretty sure.
Correct, for the comprehensive support identification.
For the comprehensive supports. So that was approved, and we needed to have a change to our contract for our vendor that actually runs our state report card, our snapshot. So I know it's been a long time since we came in and talked to the committee about our snapshot, about the state report card is what it's called federally. We call it the snapshot in Vermont. The way ours works is that the actual snapshot itself, so the public sees that in public on the web, but all of the actual calculations for actually getting everything we need is actually done in that system, sort of like on the cloud behind the web, if you will. And so that's a little bit unique in terms of how, I think, in terms of how we set up back in 2016 when we set up our state plan, which got approved in 2018. So because of that, there had been, I believe, a lull. I was deputy at the time, but there had been a lull. This was not an area that I oversaw directly. I will just say there was a lull in, I believe, finalizing the contract, the amendment that needed to be made, and getting the money for that amendment to be made to actually fix the back end of this system. Because, and it was a one-time fix, because they had to change truly the code to actually move away from these 21 to 22, 22 and 23 comparisons to a one-time fix of 2019 data comparing to 22. So I will say, and this is not a laughing matter at all, so I don't mean this in a glib or facetious way, but one of the things I have learned is that I think I might have picked the wrong career if I wanted to make money. If I wanted to make money, I should have gone into IT because every time something has to be changed like this, it is a crazy level of new money that has to be found. I mean, things that I would consider, what are you talking about? Like, it's just a change in code. It's a change in year. And it's like, nope, it's this whole big process. So we can talk more about that, but I just thought I would share with you that there's a level of frustration on our end too, that we couldn't very easily fix this issue for 2022. And for us, it's also partnering with ADS because it's a state run IT product, I guess. So
Cynthia has a follow-up.
Just a quick
Yep.
follow-up. I understand, I think I kind of get the complexity of the issue. Would there have been an option to ask the feds for like an extension, given that this was an issue beyond basic needs? And I'm just curious.
I think we did do that through, and it's actually contemplated a little bit in the letter, and I can walk you through. I think we did ask for the extensions we could. And the punchline for this letter is they really feel, given their obligations for monitoring and so forth, that they really gave us the most they could, and they had to finally kind of like bring the hammer down. So I don't think we couldn't have gotten away with, for instance, not doing an assessment in 22 or not using 22 data. I think that would have been not allowed. But they were, for instance, the deadlines they came up with in that July letter, which is actually specified again in the January letter, we were very honest with them and said, look, and by the way, my conversations with them started in late June. That was the first I knew as the interim secretary that there was stuff going on. And so once that happened, we had very regular conversations and meetings. I mean, they were ongoing, like multiple times a week. And so those initial July letter deadlines, we were very honest and said, there's a very slim chance we can make these. And initially, I think they gave us something that was like a month later. So we negotiated the September 8th one, I believe. So I think we tried, and, we tried to be as fast, but also as accurate as we could be in addressing these challenges and problems. And I think that they tried their very best to work with us as well. But this had apparently been going on, like I said, well before I learned about it in June of 2023. And, from their perspective, they were sympathetic that we'd had, some turnover at the leadership level and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, just like it would be for us with an SU, like you still have to hold that entity accountable. So does that answer?
Thank you, yes. Thank you.
So the second slide, or the other side of that handout that you have, shows the different types of identifications, because this is really, I think, important to also understand. So comprehensive supports are like, they happen every 3 years per our state plan. These are the identifications that colloquially, right, they're the bottom 5%, if you will, of our schools. They get additional dollars in addition to regular title funds and additional technical assistance and support from the agency, from our agency staff. So initially in July, there were concerns about this too, right, Josh? Like that we were behind on these. Do I have that right? Because of the 22 data, or no?
There were concerns that we had not identified them already. Yeah. We should have. We were a little late. Correct.
We were a little late on that. So that's all though they're done. They're great. I mean, they're identified. That's what it will say. So the last two pieces are the reason we got this latest January letter. And so these are two other identifications. All three of these are required in federal law. The first is targeted supports for intervention. And in our Vermont plan, we call them Equity 2 schools, which I think has been pretty confusing. So when and if we do revise our full ESSA plan, I think that would be the thing we want to actually make sure we do is cleave to the federal language, because it makes it pretty confusing when you have different wording for required things. So this is every 2 years per our approved state plan. So, and I will say what happened then, so because this is our approved state plan before COVID, we made the assumption that our amendment for COVID also spoke to, was also aligned with what we were doing in our approved state plan. I can go into that in more detail. That in essence is the disconnect that we've understood and learned and now have fixed. So because the 2021 data, we were approved that they weren't going to be held for accountability. We did not then make the TSI designations for the 2022 data because we thought that, and it would be in violation of our state plan, if that makes sense, because we would need both 2021 and 2022 data to align with Vermont's approved regular ESSA state plan. So
I'm sorry if you've already done this, but can you give us some examples of TSIs?
yeah, Josh, I'm going to let you targeted supports for intervention. So there's a group of schools that are identified. I forgot to say, sorry, Josh, I forgot to say this is about if there are gaps between historically marginalized students and non-historically marginalized students. So this is really the piece where they're holding us, the state and schools, accountable for addressing those gaps between different subgroups of students. Josh.
Yeah, thank you. So we are required to identify the TSI and ATSI, which Vermont refers to as Equity 2 and Equity 3. Vermont also has a third category, which we call Equity 1. So those are schools eligible based on several performance metrics on the snapshot, demonstrating a substantial gap between historically marginalized students and historically privileged students. So once they're identified for Equity 1, they could potentially be identified for Equity 2 or TSI. And for each student group there, the school has to be identified for Equity 1 for 2 consecutive years and either have declining performance in all student groups or the student group of interest is in the lowest 5% of Equity 1 schools for gap closure. And then there is Equity 3, which is ATSI, and those are determined through the TSI schools. And that is for each student group, the school's identified as Equity 2, and the student performance is lower than the highest performing of all students groups for those schools eligible for comprehensive supports that the secretary spoke to previously. It's a complicated formula.
Yeah, and I wish I could say I'm completely clear on, tell me the elevator speech. Honestly, tell me how you're describing this to just anyone, which I am, off the street, who's not
Sure.
living these acronyms.
We identify Equity 1 based on the size of their gaps between historically marginalized students and privileged students. We identify Equity 2.
At schools.
Yes, correct.
So each school, okay.
Correct. Equity 2 is then determined based on being Equity 1 for 2 consecutive years and
Okay.
continuing to have declining performance.
Got it.
And Equity 3 is based off those Equity 2 schools.
Yeah.
And it's just any of those Equity 2 schools whose student performance is lower than the all students group for the schools eligible for comprehensive supports, which are those bottom 5% of the performing schools in the state.
Okay.
So in a
Yes,
weird way,
Senator
it's like Equity 3.
1 second. Senator Phillips.
Sorry, Secretary Boucher.
That's okay.
TSI is Equity 1 and AST, no. Oh, boy. Okay.
No, I know. I just wish that we'd stay away from the Equity 1, 2, and 3 because it completely confuses things.
I did
So-
just want to, if I could just comment briefly to piggyback off of what my chair said. I do know from experience with I don't know what you would want to call them, underperforming schools, underserved schools, that the funds are very, very critical to their success and improvement. Just wanted to say that.
And if I may add, I think Senator Gulick, just because we're a small state, so we get like a small state minimum, the funds actually that you might be referring to are much more likely to be the regular title funds, because there's more of those. My understanding is we have more limited funds available, Josh, correct me, for the TSI and ATSI. There's some, but it's not a lot, like there are for the comprehensive identifications.
Yep, actually, all of our Title I school improvement funds go towards the schools eligible for comprehensive supports, which is that bottom 5%, which turns out to be roughly around 15 schools.
But they are by law guaranteed, if they're identified as TSI or ATSI, to get technical support. So staff like help them from the agency, even if it's not dollars to invest. But the thing I wanted to really point out is that under TSI, and Josh noted this, that you have to be sort of identified by Vermont's Equity One way of looking at, almost like it's like a first cut of like, do you have significant gaps between historically marginalized and historically privileged groups? And if you have that for 2 years, consecutive years, then you're TSI in Vermont state plan. So the challenge for us is that we didn't, 2021, we were not supposed to be using those data. This is what we thought from our COVID amendment. We weren't supposed to be using those data for accountability, which left us then unable to actually do TSI for 2022 because our state plan would have required 2021 and 22. And I'm not saying this because I'm trying to like weasel us out of this or anything. It truly was a mistaken assumption, I think, on both of our parts, I would say. So I don't think there were some transitions also with USAID, and I don't think they were kind of drawing that connection that we had made, which was kind of like, so if we do it this way, and if we just make using 2022 data, which we weren't really set up to do, without 2021, if we went with 2021 and 2022, we would actually be in violation of our state plan. If we don't do it like our state plan, we're in violation of the federal regulation. And all of it was this one-time thing because of COVID. So I think they finally understood that we were kind of, all of us, like kind of in a rock and a hard place. And that's why I think they said, fine, 2022 is kind of lost. We're going to penalize you and let's move forward with 2023. I'm only saying that because this is highly technical, but I really want the committee to understand like how we got here. It wasn't like it wasn't an intentional, we're just, blowing off USAID. It wasn't that. There really were some honest, I think, misunderstandings of like what the amendment we got meant. And then also how that would relate to our existing state plan. So as an example, when we were talking, I said, well, Adam, we thought that the COVID amendment was kind of an addendum to our regular state plan. And like our regular state plan takes precedence. And he was like, no, the COVID amendment was like the big gun, like everything should have been happening according to that, which for me, and I can ask my team if they felt the same way, that was a huge epiphany for me, because that was exactly opposite to the way we'd been thinking. We had been thinking, look, this was just a one-time amendment. Really what takes kind of decision-making precedence is our standing state plan. So I know this is like super technical, but I just wanted to clarify that. And I'm looking to the side because I have my other documents here, if you're wondering what the heck I'm doing. Questions?
You're not seeing any.
Not really, except that it seems like a pretty big misunderstanding to not understand that the COVID amendment sort of trumped the usual plan. I'm just surprised that there was that level of misunderstanding. That's pretty
well. Yeah, but hold that thought, Senator Gulick, because I want you to now look at the thing from Adam Honeysett, and I think this will help clarify that. So if you look at that second letter, and
the one dated February 22nd.
Correct.
Yes, okay.
in 2021. And you see that highlighted section that
Mhm.
says each state that receives the accountability and school identification waivers will be required to continue to support previously identified schools, resume school identification, and so on and so forth. We read that to be that we were in compliance based on that. And I would let the team kind of jump in there, Danielle or Josh, to kind of fill out the details on that. So that there was we were reading that a certain way, and it was not the way, I guess, that US Ed intended it to be read. Danielle or Josh, do you want to clarify it in plain English?
No, I think that's right. We were under the assumption that we weren't to use the 2021 data to make accountability determinations. And because our state plan requires 2 consecutive years to do so, we did not believe we had schools eligible for those determinations. I think, as Dr. Boucher indicated, we were under the impression that the amendment to the COVID plan only amended things in the amendment, that everything that wasn't amended would continue on track. And so that's
Brain
that
surgery.
meant requiring 2 years of data. Yeah.
Now, US Ed has come back and said, which I think is appropriate. They said, well, you could have asked to, amend your COVID amendment further
Okay.
based on the fact that but we didn't. And I think we didn't know that we had to, or we didn't understand that we needed to. So yes, I can understand where the critique could be lobbied that, hey, did you even know what you were doing? I would say yes, we were doing our very best. I think this language was part of what our team used to say, okay, so we don't have 2021 data to use for accountability, so therefore this part is not something we can do. But that was wrong. Any questions about that?
Don't see any.
So my last document is the letter itself, and I'm very happy to walk the committee through the different sections.
Before we
So
begin, would you tell me, how do these concerns, when this federal government reaches out, and I don't think, I'm not picking on anybody, it could be any agency, frankly. When the federal government reaches out to an agency here in the state, how do we become aware of it? I mean, the way this all happened was, I think somebody got wind of it, it was forwarded to somebody, it kind of made its way. Next thing you know, we're getting calls from the press. Generally, and I'm kind of asking you to speak for the administration a little bit, if you're comfortable doing so. How do these things make it to committees? Or I suspect they're public documents. Maybe all we needed to do was, check your website, sort of thing.
I think it's a great question. So first of all, we haven't gotten many of these. I think this is a pretty unique scenario. So the first letter in June, I think they follow the same procedure. So they always let the governor's office know in addition to the agency. And they typically, I think because it's the federal level, I think they always let the congressional delegation know. So they always send a copy of the letters to the congressional delegation. They may, I mean, it's a good question because they may, that's what they've done with us. And I can only imagine that's what they routinely do. I think they don't tend, from what I can understand, we've never had a letter. This is pretty unique, as I said, but we've also never had a letter that came to us that was just, kind of publicized and sent to the media or anything like that. That doesn't tend to be the way they roll. I mean, maybe if something were like criminal or something, that would be something that they would have to do some sort of public alert. But it's a good question.
Okay.
So this kind of walks through the original July correspondence. We had already been working with them for a month at this point, very closely, and had negotiated some of these dates, particularly the September 8th for, now this is the first one is about the comprehensive support and improvement, as I noted. And then we had to submit evidence that our local report cards were published in alignment with the federal regulations by October. And then we had to make sure, so the next piece, like Josh's piece for number 3, is that the supports had started. The supports provided to the schools had started. And those are done.
Mhm.
Those are, so we're all set with those. It's really number 4 that really is the issue, and we just went through why that's the issue with the TSI and ATSI. So that is the sticking point, and a lot of it is I just kind of went through why that's still a sticking point.
You're on number 4 on page 1.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So that is about the TSI.
Yeah.
5 and 6, we have done those, right, Danielle? 5 and 6 are done.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I think number 4 is about the 2023 data, which we're about to release. And
Okay.
so the sticking point is the TSI and ATSI, and number 1 for the 2022.
Got it. Sorry about that.
That's
Sorry
okay.
about that.
That's okay.
So number 4, 5, and 6, we are, I think we're current with right now, correct, Danielle?
Correct. We'll be completing them this week.
Correct.
Okay.
So that is also, Mr. Chair, on the last page, that is also, when we got this in January, they were also saying, I believe 1, 2, and 3 are the same, right, Danielle, as the original list of 4, 5, and 6.
Correct.
And so we are making that, we have done that, and we're finalizing that this week. Posting that. The other thing I would say, which I forgot to note at the beginning, which is important, is that the wording of the letter said that, they're withholding funds. They're not withholding funds from the state. So it's not, the federal government is not taking $100,000 back to the federal government. It's still staying in Vermont. We have to reallocate that $100,000 to the LEAs, to the districts. So it will come from the agencies, state set aside dollars.
Once this letter became public, have you received any letters from what we consider to be our usual suspects in this committee, the people that are on the ground working with kids, NEA, principal association, superintendents, anybody express concern on this, about this?
To my knowledge, no.
Okay.
I don't know if it's come up we have a weekly coffee and conversation. Has this come up, Josh? I have not. I mean, there's a lot going on in the education world right now. So
yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Anything else, Secretary Boucher, taking us through this? So like you said, numbers 4 through 6 are being completed this week. Number 1 is still an issue that you're working on, that you outlined for us in your testimony.
No, Mr. Chair, sorry. The last, number 1 is basically, you can think of as it's covered by us being penalized fiscally. And so all that's left for us is 4, 5, and 6, and we're already, yeah. So the punchline is, like, we should be good moving forward on this. It's I take it seriously to explain to the committee how we got here and to answer any questions that understandably folks might have.
Anything else, committee, on this issue? This has been helpful. I appreciate knowing this. I also appreciate understanding better TSIs, ATSIs, how those gaps, with those, how they're identified, how you monitor, all that sort of technical information is helpful. It is a complicated letter for sure. If you're not fluent in this kind of work. as your team.
Appreciate that and
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, anything else for us? Now, I know you were going to stick around at one point and talk about, you'd asked to weigh in on after school, but I think you're coming in later to talk about it.
Correct. I
Okay,
believe so, yes.
so we have
At
you coming in
4:15. At 4:15.
4:15
Yep.
to talk about after school, which we will look forward to seeing you
Great.
then.
Jess and I will both be in. Yep.
Terrific.
Virtually.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you all.
thank you. All right, committee,
Thank-
let's take
thank
10
you.
minutes, Morgan, before we have